Hello, lunchers. Come join our conversation. So excited to be here with you all, and I think I have the easy job today. I'm going to moderate, which is like a new thing with Joe and Wes here. So we have about 20 minutes. We are going to cover a multitude of topics, and we're going to do it lightning fast. So strap in. Speaking of, we're going to start with a lightning round. I got to know Joe and Wes a little bit better myself last week, and I thought you guys should get to know them better as well. So I'm going to ask you a couple of really quick questions. Want to hear from you personally, what you got going on, all right? So first question, what's your superpower, Joe?
I can read minds.
It's a great question, Michelle. I think what you guys are going to see is my superpower is panels, as well as I've always been sort of a luminary thought leader. I think you'll see that as well. So that's mine.
But see, I know he was going to say that before he even said that.
Very good. This is going to be great. Okay, so what's something you could eat straight for a week?
Barbecue.
That's a good answer.
I'm going to go with pizza on that one, Michelle. Yeah, pizza is, you get all your vegetables, everything.
The full pyramid. Great. Okay, and almost one to the last. What was your last Halloween costume with Halloween coming up?
The Mad Hatter.
Good.
I don't wear costumes. I admit to sort of phoning it in. I have an orange sweater that I typically wear, and then I think what you want, Michelle, is the real personalization of these stories. So I also put in some silly teeth, and there's a backstory to that. I have 2 pairs of ridiculous-looking bad teeth. I used to work for the BBC, and when the gentleman came to visit us from the London headquarters, my boss and I put in these ridiculous teeth because we thought it would be very cliche and funny. And then they walked in and they smiled and they had pretty much exactly the same teeth, and we quickly spit them out and retreated to our office, and luckily neither of us were fired for that. But so I wear those just to be a silly kind of orange and green looking costume.
Oh, wow. It sounds better than the Mad Hatter.
No, I think that's how Wes came to work at TruthSet.
Yes, the next day I was fired and started somewhere else.
Well, the next one's for both. The last one here is for both of you, but I'm going to start with Wes because I know you're going to have something right at the tip of your tongue. What's the last joke you told?
That last one didn't qualify, Michelle. I mean, it was gold. It was relevant. There was a setup. I mean, come on.
That's pretty good.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, that qualifies. Joe, anything? You got
No, I can't overtake him as the comedian in the group.
Okay, good. Neither can I. Okay, so what we're here to talk about, though, is what's next for us in the digital world, all jokes aside. But I want to take a pause first, and before we think about what's happening in the future or what's going to happen in the future, let's think about what has happened recently in the past. And I'd love to hear from each of you, what's one digital transformation accomplishment that you've been really proud of? Either one.
Sure, I could lead off. I mean, this panel is kind of funny. I'm sure all of you want to hear from the brand instead of like reps like me. Digital transformation. I think what I can do is probably give some examples from our purview at TruthSet from certain clients and customers of ours. Digital transformation is pretty broad. Could be everything from us adjusting to spending 12 hours in our dining room on Zoom all the way to e-commerce and stuff like that. The most valuable perspective I could probably give is where we play, which is in data quality. So I think many people that began this sort of data-driven marketing journey many years ago got spoiled by the internet, right? You could sort of target everything and it kicked off all this kind of data. And you want to apply that data and all that measurement into television and all the kind of more less digital things historically. And so I think what we've seen is that journey to data-driven, sometimes people have gone too far. And I know we'll talk probably a little bit about the headwinds and some of the things that are coming too. But before you get overly targeted and use so much data just because so much is available, are the building blocks there? And is that use of data too much, or is it even accurate? And so I guess that's my shameless plug for TruthSet, of course, is that we work in that. We look at data quality and accuracy and help to understand, are even the table stakes, identity and age, gender, are any of those even accurate to start with? And so a lot of our clients, whether they be sell-side networks or marketers and agencies, are kind of looking to us to say, am I doing too much here? Am I over-targeting myself into a corner and kind of losing some of that halo? So that's what we've kind of witnessed from a digital transformation point at TruthSet.
Yeah, on our side, we eat, sleep, breathe video. And so that's obviously a big word, right? Video, what does that mean? I think the rise of video is now taking accelerated form, especially as we look at, we're getting beyond just a traditional studio, a Netflix, producing content, to where I could all produce content, put that out there on TikTok or other varying forms, which we found, and I guess this leads to the transformation part, is this is a pretty difficult topic for most people. Either they believe they figured it out, and figuring it out means, oh, well, I run some video. But then there's another piece that compounds on top of that, which is what it really is your strategy around video. What does that mean in terms of the interplay around the content and where you're serving into? And so one of the things that, there's the shameless plug, one of the things that we do on our side is really try to find a component where we're creating a relevant experience for the user and matching that through technology, semantically reading the environment that we're serving into, and ensuring that the brand has a presence of mind with a consumer who's actually truly engaged with a particular piece of content, and then the experience itself kind of melds itself into the general content experience that they're having. So I'd say some of the transformation really is around, I wouldn't say in necessarily new uncharted waters, but the point is that the rise and the rapidness in terms of the development, having video everywhere, I think is going to be paramount for really just a strong question for those audiences, or even for brands themselves, which is, what does that mean? And then how do we maybe even capitalize that, especially as younger audiences are much, much more in tune to consuming video informational, entertainment-wise. And that really is going to be a cascading future versus the newspapers of old, not to offend any newspaper people.
Yeah, and I think that probably is on a lot of brands' minds, not just where that content is going to be distributed, but how are we going to create all that content and have it be very relevant? So I think the next place I'd love for us to kind of tackle is, a lot of brands are thinking about digital transformation, right? And I would say the majority, and having a digital first strategy. That isn't necessarily different, but I think, to your point, Wes, some of the headwinds might be different as we head into 2023. And what do you think, in a couple of words, what is going to be the biggest challenge for us in 2023 and beyond?
In a couple of words, I guess I don't know. But if you gave me a little more time to, say a bunch of stuff.
You can expound in a minute.
I'll expound. Yeah, so I think the headwinds, and obviously it's ad week. People all up and down are going to be talking constantly about some of the real buzzwords that are out there. I think, Joe, you're probably better talking about, how people are dealing with cookies and privacy and that kind of stuff. For us, where we're playing is that those challenges are kind of age-old questions. One, so how do I continue to build audiences with some of that privacy happening? So a lot of our brands are and publishers, sell-side folks, are scrambling to build up as much first-party data audiences as they can to get authenticated users, so that they can kind of continue to ride the storm past some of those privacy and cookie restrictions. The other thing is, for us, the media fragmentation of all this content, all this digital, all these walled gardens, makes it very, very difficult to measure and understand what's happening because they're not talking to each other. Again, I'm not saying anything that you won't hear 100 times over with all the alternative measurement and currency talks this week. So those will continue to be issues. And then, not to bring the dark cloud, but I think if we talk about 2023 altogether, people are starting to talk about the market downturn and sort of using words like recession. And I think the bottom line for people will be, I still need to somehow be able to reach my customers, but how can I help eliminate waste, right? So even if it's no matter digital first or where you are on that journey, are there ways to continue to do that efficiently? And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure coming down on marketing orgs and all divisions of companies. How do I save that money? And if I can eliminate some of that waste in a smart way and prove it, I think it's going to make for an easier year.
I'll compound a little bit on that. I think that some of the headwinds in general, right, are definitely going to be the inability to ignore any longer that the consumer has a seat at the table. And so you're, in general, going to have to start to think about strategies of how do I reach consumers in a digitized fashion as it relates to whether they gave me consent or they didn't give me consent. It doesn't mean that one's is better than the other. That's not true at all. I think it just means that you have to speak to somebody a little bit differently, whether they've given you consent, and if not, slightly different message. And I think that obviously compounds from a creative perspective, right? That obviously time and place, which screen are they on, lean in, lean back, right, will lend itself towards an amazing piece, right? The advancements in terms of creative turn and ability to speak that way. But outside of that, I think that also does compound from a global perspective, which if you are a global brand, right, it's a fact, right, that you have to navigate that GDPR overseas, CCPRA going into enforcement effect in January. So, fines will probably be mirroring some of what we've seen in GDPR, which could be a frightening prospect for, I think, a lot of people. But I think that you don't need to be fearful as long as you have a plan and a strategy of how you're going to navigate that water. And then also from a digitization perspective, right, how do I do so intelligently without waste in a time component where, yes, recession might be a tightening of the belt buckle, but as we've seen from other studies, right, this is the moment for brands to continue to capitalize and take advantage of mind share, where other brands obviously will retrench a bit because whatever, budget cuts or what have you. But I think there's an intelligent way to do it. I think you just have to be aware of a new partner at the table, which is consent.
Yeah, and that's just to stay on the brand side, Joe, because you work with a lot of brands. So I think you're right. A lot of strategies and tactics will need to be altered. Can you expound on that a little bit? What do you think a specific strategy or tactic might need to be for brands?
Sure. So one of the things that we've been having conversations with a lot of brands and has really, I think, resonated as and then an output of a strategy really is around brand suitability. And so when this comes up, most of the time I flip the question back around, which is define brand suitability, right? What does that even mean to the brand? And what I've experienced, at least, is that every single brand has their own version of what that is. Surprise, I guess. So one of the things that we've done with some of our brands on a global level, and those that are a little bit more concerned around first party data, or maybe the partners, I'm not quite certain they have like the rights or true consent to that because they're kind of passing that along, is really us just leveraging our semantic technology. So we'll read the context of where something's being served into. We don't need consent in that regard. And so that is a definite strategy. I'm not saying, I mean, you all should work with me because it'd be amazing. But if you don't have to work with me, right? It's just the strategy of no consent, okay, then how do I contextually or semantically target or precision into this? And then applying, depending on which screen I'm on, does the creative match, right, what I want to illustrate or how I want to engage them? Obviously, when you start to compound with first-party data, then obviously you have, yes, more insights because the users opted in to do so. But particularly to your question, the semantic angle and then matching, using that to match brand suitability requirements is something that we've seen be successful.
That's great. And Wes, kind of the same follow-up question for you, because you work with a larger ecosystem of these players. And what do you think specifically might need to be altered with their strategies or tactics?
Yes, that's a great shameless plug segue, Michelle. But yeah, so we do our partners across networks that are working with our data accuracy. There's really two, I guess I would highlight. So one, just this week we actually launched a product where brands, really any company with first party or CRM data can upload their audiences and get back all the data accuracy scores from us. So that influences obviously areas where you can, you may be collecting a bunch of email addresses and starting to build those audiences so that you're sustainable for the future, but might not have the insights on them to influence, like, what should my messaging be like? As Joe talked about, how should I speak to this audience? Is it more male, female, Hispanic, African American, upscale, kids, moms, whatever it is? And so we're doing that to help kind of empower people to build up. That's one tactic that people are using, Michelle, right, is to build up that first party data. And then in audience building, so with networks and platforms that we partner with, we're able to put accuracy scores on every single ID that's being used there. So we've seen clients like folks we work with, like Heineken, Hershey, Unilever, have a Hispanic targeted campaign and use any of the data that's out there, all sorts of third-party data. It's filled with a lot of error. And so if the technology exists, spoiler alert, it does, to actually eliminate those IDs that are inaccurate, we can actually scrub those out and have a really high fidelity approach to that consumer target. And that just immediately eliminates the waste. So you can point that right to the bottom line.
That's great. So there's one last big thing on my mind, and I'm sure it's probably on a lot of brand marketers' minds too. We are constantly trying to evolve our organizations, not only from a capability standpoint, but how we're designed really, to deliver on these challenges and needs for the future. So since you work with a lot of brands and other organizations, I'm curious to hear, what have you seen works in a marketing organization design, and what are some pitfalls maybe we might want to avoid as we're thinking about those challenges?
Oh, thank you, Joe. That's a broad one, Michelle. You brought a pretty wide array of things there. But yeah, I guess, again, my first answer is, of course, I don't know. But my follow-up expound would be, I think I've seen a lot of brands that, as they lean into data-driven marketing, whether it's trying to hire some programmatic people in-house, trying to get together IT with marketing, those can be a lot of pitfalls. We always say we want to have the non-siloed organization, have certain social and video. And some people, I think, really botch that, whether it's, I don't know why that is. And some people just, for whatever reason, get that recipe right. So I think, it's nothing new, but I think if there's a leadership kind of setting the example that, technology and some of this digital approach actually fits with finance and fits with marketing that has been, around for 100 years. That's where I think you see the buy-in. And obviously a part of that is seeing a chief data officer, seeing a chief digital officer. All of those things are progress, but I think there's going to be bumps along the road anytime you try to do that. And so just to keep testing and learning, and where you fall down, just have the openness to, continue improving.
What about you, Joe?
Oh, Wes was being political, so I won't be political. I think some of the challenges that we find, right, is a disconnect, honestly, between what the agency receives or tells versus what actually gets to your desk. And so I think that becomes challenging, or a little bit of a runaround, if you will, because, one, it's only come through me, the agency person, and then, oh, but don't go and talk to Michelle because, how dare you, I own that relationship. So I think in general, like part of I guess if I sum it up, I think the general challenge is, how do you get, innovative things or things that should be on the radar of a marketer or a brand, and do so in a collaborative way, right, with the agency people, being vested in why that's a good partner, why it makes sense, but also having a moment to obviously share that with the brand. And I would say that just being honest, right, is the biggest challenge that we end up finding, because the agency may like it, but it may never translate to the way that we would talk to you about it directly, right? Or there's always going to be some game of telephone where information starts missing its way. Outside of that, I think that those are just areas of how does informational flows happen maybe more efficiently. How does that get raised up, and perhaps maybe more collaborative days, or I don't have solutions for that. Could be a potential.
Guess we'll still have a job then trying to figure that out. Great. Well, that wraps us. Thank you so much, Joe and Wes, for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.